What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we'll be taking a look at the future in Pokemon Go, specifically talking about Generation 5 Pokemon and the best attackers of that generation. How I decided this was simply taking a look at the highest top 10 attack stats, and if there was a Pokemon above 4,000 CP, I went ahead and applied the 9% nerf. So I'm very excited about it, but before we get into the actual list, we have to know what's currently going on in Pokemon Go. Technically, the Deoxys attack form has the highest attack stat in Pokemon Go at 414, but because it is such a glass cannon, it ends up being kind of unusable. And the biggest benchmark that we really have is Mewtwo with an attack stat of 300. That's like the golden standard. If you can beat that, you are going to at least have an option of being solid, you know, besides like the Deoxys forms, right? And believe it or not, we do have two Pokemon that will be able to surpass that 300 attack stat that we'll have towards the end. Rampardos, a solid option as well, an attack stat of 295. That is completely solid. We'll have one beat that as well that isn't necessarily above 300. So I'm excited about it. We've got a lot of really cool Pokemon to talk about, and we're going to go ahead and jump into it. The first one that we have to talk about is Meloetta. So Meloetta, at least the Purette form, keep that in mind, there are two of them. It has a max AP of 3,929. I know that's a little bit hard to see, but it is a dual type of normal as well as fighting type. And when you take a look at the attack stat, this is a solid attack stat, 270. To give you kind of some comparison, that is very close to a Pokemon like Groudon and Kyogre. Well, given the fact that they got it nerfed, for example, since they were above 4,000 CP. And if you're curious about the background, the reason why I don't have the Lucky variant on here is because it is a mythical version, which means it's most likely not going to be tradable. For example, we can't trade a Deoxys. Up next, we have Chandelure. So Chandelure has a max AP of 3,268. It's going to be one of the lower ones that we will see on this list. A dual type of ghost as well as fire typing. So think of something like an Alolan Marowak, for example. But the reason why people are so excited about this Pokemon in particular is the fact that it has a very high attack stat of 271. It will be a little bit more of a glass cannon. I mean, it's barely breaking that 3,000 CP mark, meaning that it's not going to necessarily be that well rounded, but it's still going to be pretty cool to just see exactly how it will end up functioning with an attack stat like that. Will it be able to get over it? Something similar would probably be a Gengar that has a really good attack stat, and although it is a glass cannon, it can still dish out the damage because of that attack stat. Moving on, we have Reshiram and Zekrom. Very excited about these two Pokemon. Unfortunately for them, they both did receive a 9% nerf just because of them being above 4,000 CP. And because of that, it did bring down their attack stat. Their initial attack stat was above 300, but now it's at 275 with that nerf. I'm excited about these two Pokemon though. Not necessarily from the dragon typing per se, but I actually think that their secondary typing is going to provide some interest, at least for me, especially related to Reshiram. Will Reshiram be able to take on Moltres, for example, and take over that #1 spot? Of course, it will definitely depend on the moveset, but Reshiram definitely has the tools that it needs, and so does Zekrom to be able to take over like the #1 spot from its respective typings. Let's go and move on to the next one. We have Haxorus. So Haxorus is a really cool Pokemon for a couple different reasons. One, it is a pure dragon type Pokemon, and secondarily, it is a non-legendary Pokemon, which means it could theoretically be very accessible to us in Pokemon Go. You're not having to do legendary raids, for example, to be able to gain access to it. It has a max AP of 3,605 with an attack stat of 285. That is insane. I could easily see Haxorus doing very well in Pokemon Go. Definitely excited about that. There is a lot of competition from the dragon typing, but because it doesn't carry a secondary typing, like for example a flying type, it will not be double weak to ice type Pokemon. So I'm curious to see how that will end up playing out in Pokemon Go. The next Pokemon on our list is Landorus, the Therian form, not the Incarnate form. Something kind of cool about this Pokemon, it's almost one of the most perfect Pokemon in regards to CP because its CP is 3,922, very close to that 4,000 threshold, but because it does not cross it, it ends up escaping a nerf completely. If it were like 4001 CP, it would get nerfed by 9% and would be much lower than this if you think about it, which is kind of an interesting concept. But if you take a look at that attack stat, 289, that is insane. And as far as the typing is concerned, I'm most interested in the ground typing. I think it would be really cool to see ground type Pokemon get updated. We end up seeing an update to just fairy types in general by them simply getting granted access to a quick move, Charm. And because of that, all of a sudden, fairy type move have become better. I would love to see a rework on ground type Pokemon just to get maybe more damage for a move like Earthquake, for example. That way we can see some ground types compete overall in Pokemon Go. Moving on to the next one. We have Archeops. Now go ahead and check this out. We've got a max CP of 3,331, and because of it having an attack stat like this at 292, you know it is basically attack heavy. It is going to be very much a glass cannon. But something kind of interesting about Archeops is going to center around the fact that it has an ability which will hold it back. It's known as the Defeatist. So this is going to be a similar situation like Slacking, for example. Slacking has an amazing attack stat, but what Niantic ended up doing was they tried to interpret it so that it gets a nerf, or it gets the ability that holds it back in Pokemon Go. For example, we got Yawn for Slacking. So I wouldn't expect to see too much from Archeops in this game, unfortunately, just because of its ability. But still, I think it's pretty cool that it has an attack stat that high. It makes you wonder if at all it could end up being useful. Maybe they'll just give it kind of a weird moveset as opposed to like a 0 damage move. But we're just going to have to see. Moving up the list, we are not yet ready to break into that 300 attack stat, but we do have Thundurus. I am so excited about Thundurus. Max CP of 3,659. When you take a look at its typing, the reason why I am personally so excited about it is related to that electric typing. This has the potential to take over the #1 spot away from Raikou. Forget about it, Zapdos. A new Pokemon is in town. We have Thundurus, the Therian form. Very excited about it. Once again, crossing our fingers Niantic does not give it just an absolutely terrible moveset, and at least gives us a double stab, like a double electric, a double flying, something, you know what I mean? Like something like that. If you're having to mix and match, it's going to make it very difficult to use in Pokemon Go, but very excited about it. We're ready now to go ahead and get into the #1 spot / #2 spot, and that is Kyurem White as well as Kyurem Black. If you take a look at their attack stat, they break the 300 attack stat mark with an attack stat of 310. When you take a look at these Pokemon, they have a max CP of 4,596, and that is actually after the nerf. The 9% nerf is applied to these two Pokemon, and as you can see, they technically have the exact same CP. But we're going to explain how that's possible, but I wanted to go ahead and distinguish between these two. If you're wondering like, well, what the heck's going on if they have the same stats? They do have moves that the other variant does not have itself, so I think that they'll try to distinguish it at least from the moveset perspective. And if you're curious as to how they end up having the exact same CP, I want to go ahead and do a side-by-side comparison. So if you take a look at it, we've got the exact same HP stat as each other. And then moving on to the next one, the attack stat and the special attack are actually switched. And then if you take a look at it from the defense standpoint as well, you'll see that the defense and special defense are just simply switched from each other. And then finally, the speeds are the same. And Pokemon Go pretty much just looks at what the better stat of the two is. That way, it ends up not mattering in this case. If you are very curious about how you end up translating these stats over to Pokemon Go stats and then eventually into CP, go ahead and check out the link in the description. I decided to post a video on my second channel explaining that because I get a lot of questions about it. This is how I am able to calculate future Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Is simply because the stats already exist in the main series. We just have to translate it over to Pokemon Go stats. So for anybody out there asking, you know, how do you know this if it isn't in the game? How do you know this if it hasn't been data mined? Math. That's pretty much it. And then the simple fact that these stats already exist. But anyways, I hope you did enjoy this video. I want to go ahead and end on a question of the day. What Pokemon are you looking forward to the most to be added into Pokemon Go from Generation 5? Maybe it is something like Landorus, or it is another Pokemon. Regardless of whatever it is, let me know in the comments section below, and I will see you next time. This is where we give a huge shout out to the patrons on Patreon. As many of you may not know, as far as YouTube content creators are concerned with smaller channels, you don't make that much money, although there is a lot of hard work that goes into it. So support on Patreon is very important to smaller creators, and I want to say thank you so much for everyone who has chosen to be a part of it.